That being said, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Allie. I am a doctor of physical therapy, as well as a nationally certified Pilates instructor. I've been practicing in Boston for the last 5 years. I recently opened my own practice a few months ago, and I have been teaching with the Community Online Academy since its beginning 11 weeks ago, which is hard to believe. Time goes by quickly. So this back program is a little bit different every single week. It is mostly a movement-based program. So we're going to do some strengthening, some stretching for your back. Every week we talk a bit about ergonomics and a different topic. So this week we kind of build on what we talked about last week, which is how to bend over safely. So today we're going to talk about bending over, but also picking something up. So we'll get to that towards the end of class. If at any point you have a question, write it to me in the chat. I will read through all those questions at the end, and I will answer all your questions. We'll save a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. Now, one thing I always like to highlight about these classes is that everyone's back is different, and you guys know your backs well. So I encourage you to be an advocate for yourself. I offer lots and lots of modifications throughout these programs, so please listen to them and take a modification if you need it. The point of this class is for your back to feel good. And so if something doesn't feel right, take a modification, take a rest, come back through the next exercise. And that's how you guys will get the most out of this class. So with that being said, we're going to start down on our mats. And if you are just logging in, you just need a mat, either yoga mat, blanket, or towel to lie down, and a small pillow nearby can be helpful. So we'll start back on the mat. I'm going to slide back here and grab a seat. All right, so you guys can lie down. I'm just going to stay sitting up so that I can give you guys some better cues to get started, and then we'll get into our movement. So if when you lie down on your back, you feel more comfortable having your knees bent, you can do so. If you need a pillow behind your head, go ahead and grab that. I just want you guys to find a comfortable position to get settled in. And I always like to start class with a body scan. So whether that's an early morning class for you, you're partway through your day, I want you to get connected in with your body and really notice how your body feels on the mat today. There's no right or wrong for how your body feels, but I just want you to notice it and start to get in touch with your body. So scanning from the top of your head all the way down to your toes. Notice any differences you may feel from side to side, any spots of tension. Notice your breath. Notice how your back feels on the mat today. And as you get connected to your breath and how your back feels, see if you can just gently expand your breath. So make it a little bit bigger. And I always talk about our breath. It's important, especially when it comes to lifting things. We're going to talk about this again later in class when we get to our ergonomics section. So notice how your breath can get bigger by taking big inhales through your nose and exhales out through your mouth. And our breathing changes the amount of pressure around our spine, which is why it's so important that we manage our breath when we do things that are more strenuous, like lifting something heavy. So try 1 or 2 more breaths just like that at your own pace. I'm going to join you guys down on the mat. And if your legs were all the way extended, go ahead and bend both of your knees, resting your feet down flat. From here, we're going to start with some pelvic rocking, but I want to give you guys a cue that we're going to use throughout class. So feeling the bottom of your rib cage, the bones of the bottom of your ribs, and the bones of the top of your hips. The space between those 2 bones is going to be important for us. So what we'll start doing in this program is making that space smaller and then making that space bigger by gently rocking our pelvis front to back. So if you can imagine the space underneath your low back, it is closing and opening. And this is gentle. The point of this in the beginning of the program is just to introduce a little bit of movement into our spine. So if it's the first movement you've done today, it's okay if it's stiff. It's okay if you don't have a lot of range of motion. Just work within what's comfortable for your body. But hopefully as we start this rocking front to back, you start to feel that that movement loosens up a little bit. Now we're actually going to take this into our first strengthening exercise of the day, but this exercise is fun because it's also a stretching exercise for our spine. So it's kind of a good bang for your buck. You get a little bit of both stretching and strengthening. So the way we're going to do that is starting by closing that space under our low back, doing a pelvic tilt, and then continuing to curl the spine up and then softly melting the spine down. So for those of you who are familiar with the bridging exercise, this is called an articulated bridge, meaning you're lifting one vertebrae up at a time, and then you're coming back down one vertebrae at a time. So it is a strengthening exercise for your glutes, and we'll get into that a little bit more later in class, but you also get the benefit of a nice stretch to the backside of your spine. So something I like to imagine here is that my spine is like a string of pearls, and I'm picking up one vertebrae at a time, and I'm placing one vertebrae at a time back down onto the mat. So nice and gentle here, curling up and softening and melting the spine back down. We'll try about 3 more like that. I'm gonna come take a quick peek at the camera so I can see how you guys are doing with this one. And keep in mind that your range of motion is what you make of it. So it can be as big or as small as your back feels comfortable. Good, Sanjay, rest your chest down on the mat a little bit. Yeah, there you go, good. And Dio, you can walk your feet in a little closer towards your bottom. That's it, guys. We'll try just one more there. And then melt the spine all the way down. Awesome. From here, allow your arms to rest wide out to the side, walk your feet and your knees together, and we'll just gently rinse out that movement by starting to add some rotation, rocking the legs side to side. And as you do this side to side motion, again, it's within your spine's comfortable range of motion. It might be different from side to side, and that's totally fine. Just work within what your body is comfortable with this morning or this afternoon. And try and keep your knees together. That helps to ensure the rotation happens in your back and not into your hips. Good. We'll do about 3 more just like this. Very nice, guys. Last 2. And one more time, and then we'll settle somewhere right in the middle. Good. Okay, so we did a little bit of strengthening for the backside of our body already. We're going to do some strengthening now for our core muscles. And so what we're looking at today is that while we exercise our core, the space between our ribs and hips doesn't change. And the reason being is that our core is functioning to keep our spine still. And you're going to see how that's important during some bigger movements when we do lifting, that our spine is stabilized, that it's still. So what we're going to do is bend both knees into our chest and give ourselves a gentle hug. And this can feel nice. You can maybe massage out your spine for just a moment by rocking side to side. And then what we're going to do is practice reaching our arms and legs away from one another and then pulling them back in. Now, if you immediately felt a change in that space, like your ribs lifted off the mat, I want you to press your arms and legs up a little bit higher and then pull them back in. If this is feeling really easy, you can challenge yourself by pressing your legs and arms a little bit lower. So find that sweet spot where it feels like, yes, this is a challenge, but I'm able to keep that spacing between my ribs and hips the same. And you can even keep your hands there for a repetition or 2, moving just the legs if you want to feel that. Now, we talked about breath. Make sure you're breathing. It's easy in a challenge like this to hold your breath. There's not a right or wrong way to breathe. I just want to make sure that you are breathing. Good, guys. We'll try 3 more. And 2. Excellent. Last time. Good. And then hug both knees in towards your chest. Again, you can rock your spine side to side. Now, in just a moment, we're going to come up to a seated position through a roll-up, which is an abdominal exercise as well. If you would like to just come up to sitting position, that's fine. You can do so now. Otherwise, straighten out your legs, reach your arms long overhead, take a nice full body stretch. This can feel good. And then with an exhale breath, you're gonna look towards your toes and curl your spine up to a seated position. So our abdominals, they have two functions. One is to keep our spine still, which is the exercise we just did. Two is to move our spine. And so that was that sitting up motion. That's our abdominals. It's a different set of our abdominal muscles, but they're the ones that help create movement. Now in this position, we're gonna do a gentle hamstring stretch. So reach your fingertips forward and very gently hinge your spine to reach towards your toes. Now, if you have sciatica or you've had sciatica, pain down the back of your legs, I want you to add a soft bend to your knees. Okay, you can still get a good stretch in your hamstrings, but sometimes that position can be irritating if you've had a history of sciatica. Now, if your legs are straight, I want you guys to notice the difference here between being collapsed and rounded forward versus keeping my spine tall and bending from my hip to hinge forward. I can still feel a good stretch in the back of my legs, but it's not compression for my spine by bending forward. We spend a lot of time bending forward already with all the sitting we do. We want to minimize the compression on our spine, keeping that flat back as we reach. Good, guys, and we'll just hold this here for one more breath. And then carefully bring your arms down. Good, we're gonna flip on over to an all fours setup. So when we set up on all fours, your hand should be right underneath your shoulder and your knees right underneath your hips. Now, if you have some knee sensitivity, this is a great place for the pillow. So you can give yourself a little bit of extra padding with a pillow. If you have wrist sensitivity, you can lower onto your forearms. Okay, so either position is fine. We're gonna work through a few cat-cows here. So very gently rounding your spine and then letting your spine drop down into extension. And again, this should be within your spine's comfortable range of motion. So you can explore what those extremes of your motion are, but it shouldn't be painful. And hopefully as we round and extend a couple more times, you feel your spine starting to loosen up a little bit. We'll try about 2 more there. Good, guys. And last time. And then we're gonna settle somewhere right in the middle. So this should look like a relatively flat back. Like if I had a tray full of glasses of water, I could balance it right on our back. Now, once you have that position, very gently, I want you to rock forward and backwards. But I want you to imagine that that tray of waters is still on your back and you're not going to spill a single drop. So you're maintaining that flat back as you shift forward and as you shift backwards. What this does is it helps you to bend at your hip, what's called a hip hinge. And being able to keep your back still and bend from your hip is the foundation of a squatting movement. It's also the foundation of any lifting that we do. So I like to show you guys this in the beginning so we can get comfortable with how to bend our hips and stabilize our spine. As you get comfortable, maybe you can make this motion a little bit bigger, pushing back a little bit farther, but still keeping that nice flat spine. Good, guys. We'll do about 3 more here. Last 2. Last time. And then slowly we're gonna shift forward, lower yourself down, and this time lie all the way down onto your stomach. So once you're here, if lying on your stomach right off the bat feels like some pressure for your spine, you can put a pillow underneath your hip. Sometimes being in this extended position is a stretch in itself because our spine is so used to being bent forward, sitting, that laying the spine flat can be a lot. So add that pillow here if needed. You can also separate your feet just slightly wider than your mat and place your hands flat underneath your shoulders. We're gonna start to lift the spine up into extension. And it's not just your low back. I want you to practice also lifting your upper back. And you're only gonna lift the spine as high as you can go without any soreness or pain in the back, no pinching. So you're gently lifting. Maybe you can come all the way up into a full extension, but just work within what's comfortable for your spine. Now, one thing I see a lot here is that as you lift up, your shoulders hike up by your ears. This is not a shoulder clasp formally, but I do want you guys to be conscious and aware of that. So try and keep your neck nice and long. Imagine shining your heart forward as you lower and lift. And again, hopefully as you move a couple times through this range of motion, you can start to get a little bigger movement that's more comfortable for your spine. We'll do 3 more. Good, guys. And 2 more. Beautiful. And 1 more time. We're going to press ourselves all the way up, this time sitting back on our heels as far as you can and walking your fingertips forward. If you're comfortable here, you can drop your forehead and rest it down onto the mat. I'll keep mine lifted so I can talk to you guys, but you can find that position. Now, once you're here, you can go ahead and also walk both of your hands to the right side of your mat. You should feel a nice stretch through the left side body, and this stretches out your lat muscle. Your latissimus, the lat, is actually, I like to think of it as part of your core. It is a muscle that actually goes all the way down to your lumbar spine, and it provides support for the back side of your body. So we'll go ahead now and walk our hands over to the left side of the mat, feeling the stretch through the right side lat muscle. And you can just notice, oftentimes we do have a difference from side to side here, but keeping this muscle nice and flexible can help with your spine flexibility at the same time. So we'll take 1 more deep breath here. And then gently come on up to a seated position. So we're going to now move into some standing exercises. So if everybody can come up to a standing position, if you need to adjust your camera, I'm going to adjust mine just very slightly so you guys have a good picture here. You can do so now. So like I said, last week, if you were in my class, we talked a little bit about squatting, how to bend over, keeping your spine in a safe position. And squatting is the foundation of picking things up. But sometimes when stuff is really low on the floor, a squat isn't enough to get there. So we're going to build on that movement today. But I want to go back to the squatting first, because a lot of times that is a tricky movement for people to learn. And I think it's a good strengthener as well. It's a nice exercise that you can do if you only have 30 seconds in your day to do a couple of squats coming out of your chair. So what we'll try is keeping your thumbs on the bottom of your ribs and your pinkies on the top of your hips. So that same spacing we talked about earlier. In a good squat, you actually don't change the position of your spine. A good squat comes from your hips. So you're bending your hips backwards, you're bending your hips forward. So the space between your ribs and hips, indicative of your spine, shouldn't change. So what that looks like, I'm going to show you guys from the side, is that I bend my hips backwards and then I press my hips forward. So although my trunk position changes, I'm tipping my trunk forward, the space between my ribs, the actual position of my spine, is unchanged. So if you can keep your hands here to give yourself that feedback, go ahead and give that a try. And I always like to remind people, a squat should bend your hips first, then your knees, then press your hips forward to stand up tall. Bend your hips backwards, then your knees, and press your hips forward to stand up tall. So in this form of a squat, because our back position really isn't changing, it shouldn't be painful for our back. And you might not be able to go super low. That's okay. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. But go ahead and give that a try. Now, one of the most common mistakes I see is when you get into that low part of your squat here, the front of your rib cage has dropped to the floor, and that's gravity kind of doing its job. So you need to think about pulling the front rib cage up. That way, the space between your ribs and hips doesn't get bigger as you squat down. So go ahead and give that a try. I want to come up and take a peek because I know these can be tricky. Good, Robbie, that looks great. Nice job. So Anita, make sure that you bend your hips first and then your knees. Yes, much better. Exactly. There you go. Good, guys. Very nice. Good, Tracy. Good, Louise. Let's try about 3 more like that. The other thing is to let your gaze, your eyesight come down to the floor and then stand up tall, because remember, your head is an extension of the rest of your spine. So if your head is lifted, it becomes a lot trickier to keep the rest of your spine in a good position. So that looked great. So I want you guys to think of that squat that we just practiced as your, I'm gonna bend over and pick up something, or I'm gonna sit down in a chair kind of movement. That would be picking up something that's relatively high from the ground. But now let's say there's something all the way on the floor. My squat is not really low enough to get something all the way on the floor. So what we're gonna use to get that is a lunging type motion. But before we do that, I wanna show you guys a quick little test to figure out which leg you should lunge with. So what we're gonna do is try a little balance exercise. So you're gonna push your feet down into the floor, feeling your big toe, pinky toe, and heel on both feet, and keep your hands on your hips. You can feel how in standing, both of your hips are about at the same height. We're gonna try first lifting our left leg. So go ahead and lift your left leg and just try and find your balance. Once you find your balance, see if the height of your hips is still the same. Oftentimes we end up hiking the lifted leg a little bit higher. Try and level off the height of your hips, and it's tricky. It might make you feel a little bit off balance, and that's okay. Just notice that and try and hold your balance. Now I want to show you guys one other thing here. You guys look great. A lot of times when we balance, we kind of use our back to lean backwards and help ourselves balance. I want to challenge you guys to stack your ear over your shoulder over your hip, and your hip right over your knee and ankle. So your body is in this one long line. So see if you can find that and try and hold that balance. It can be a lot of work. Good. Okay, so we just did on our right leg. We're now going to do the same thing on the left side. So go ahead and push your left foot down, lift your right leg up, try and find the level pelvis. Think about that sideways alignment. Are you rounded forward? Are you leaning backwards? Can you get your shoulders right up over your ankles and hold? Now, the reason we do this balance is because almost everyone has one side where they feel stronger, where they feel more stable. And that's the leg you're going to use to help you with your lunging. So for me, this side feels much better than my right side. And you guys might be different, just notice it. It's also a good test to show you, hey, maybe I need to work on the strength on that other side a little bit more to make me more balanced. So we'll just hold this for another moment. Good, guys. And then go ahead and shake it out. Now, if you're someone who's perfectly symmetrical, good for you, that's wonderful. You can pick either leg. But if you felt a little bit stronger on one side than the other, I want you to remember that leg. We're going to use that to help us lunge. So when people hurt their backs, a lot of times I hear that it's when they were bending over picking something up. And so one of the most risky things we can do for our spine is to both bend and twist at the same time. So we're going to work on our mechanics today and see if we can figure out how to get to the floor without bending and twisting. So what I want to show you guys, I'm going to use my left leg, my stronger leg, as the one that stays in front. From there, I'm going to step my right leg, or the weaker one, behind me, use my hands on my left leg, and lower myself down. Now, if you feel really, really off balance, it's okay to have the wall next to you or a chair next to you. Now, I can bend forward and reach the floor pretty easily without bending my spine a lot. It's pretty minimal. So I go ahead, I can pick something up. Now I'm gonna either just use my hands on my left knee and stand up tall. So we'll try that again. I'm gonna step my weaker leg backwards, lower myself down, go ahead and pick up, do whatever task I have on the floor, and then come back up. So I like to use this. I have patients who like to do a lot of gardening. This is a great way to get down onto the floor for gardening. It's also a great way if you have trouble getting up from the floor to put your stronger leg in front of you, keep your hands on that knee, and push into that foot to stand up tall. So you guys can practice that. I'm gonna come take a peek and see how everybody feels. Now, if you're somebody who felt pretty symmetrical, go ahead and try both sides. This is a bigger movement, and you can see what side feels more comfortable. Good, Steve, that looked great. Excellent. Carlos, that looks wonderful. Good. Hi, Pramod, welcome back. Good job. Good, nice work there, Louise. Everybody looks great with these. Anita, Andy, those look good. How does everybody feel? Does your back feel okay? Good, good. So this should be pretty minimally stressful to your back, which is the added benefit. And it is actually a good strengthener for our hip muscles, which do a lot of supporting for our back. So we're now going to come back into that lunge position. And just go ahead and hold it for a moment. This is actually a nice setup for our last stretch of the day, which is for our hip flexor muscle. If you have sensitivity to kneeling and kneeling for a long time, add a pillow under your back leg. But once you're in this kneeling position, you're going to rotate your backwards hip forward and then very slowly lunge into your front leg. And you will start to feel a stretch. In this case, it's my right leg, but you'll feel a stretch in the hip flexor of your back leg. Okay, if you don't feel that stretch, see if you can engage your core muscles, even the butt muscle of your back leg, and that should help you to deepen the stretch. Now, the reason we stretch our hip flexor is because it actually runs from your knee all the way up and it attaches on your spine. And so when this muscle is tight, it can pull on your spine all day and give you some discomfort. We're going to take one more deep breath here, and then we'll switch our legs. So you can go ahead now and put your opposite leg in front, in this case, my right leg. I'm going to rotate my left hip forward, keep my spine up nice and tall, core is active, and slowly bend forward. A lot of times I see when people don't feel the stretch, they're too bent forward. Remember that this muscle attaches to your spine. So the taller your spine is, the bigger stretch you're going to get in the front of the hip. And again, you can always add those pillows here to give yourself a little extra padding if it's really uncomfortable on your knee. Good, guys. And we'll take one more deep breath here. And then go ahead and take a rest. I actually want to show you guys one other quick thing. This is more of a knee thing than a back thing, but I hear it a lot. If kneeling, even with a pillow, is really, really uncomfortable, here's a quick trick. So you can take a pillow. When you rest your, when you use it to kneel, you're actually going to let your knee hang off the kneecap itself, off the front of the pillow. That way, the pressure goes into your shin, and there's no pressure underneath your kneecap. So that's a little trick that you can use if that continues to be uncomfortable. Now, so we've made it to the end of our program today. I'd love to take some time to answer some of your questions. So because we have this nice intimate group, if you guys would like to unmute yourself, you can go ahead and do that, or you can write any questions that you have into the chat. But what I hope that you take from class today is a couple lessons about ergonomics and bending, of course, but that some of these stretches you can use in little bits and pieces throughout your day. So you don't have to do them all at once, but breaking up your day with a couple little stretches here and there can really help to keep your spine flexible, warm, and strong. So I can hear somebody I think is unmuted here. Does somebody, do you guys have any questions? You can always raise your hand too. Or you guys can write them in the chat. Robbie, did you have a question?
No, not at all. I found that really useful.
Awesome.
Yeah, I really love these classes. Thank you.
Oh, I'm so glad. Pramod, did you have a question?
Yes, Ali. Just a question regarding the spasms that you get in the back. The spasms themselves, are they because the back muscles aren't strong?
It depends. So sometimes, yes. Our back muscles, or really any muscle in your body, they can go into spasm because our body suddenly is in pain, and it's the best way our body can think to quickly sort of stabilize and protect from that pain that you're feeling. So it's really kind of figuring out what is the source of your pain to give you the best answer as to why you might be getting those spasms. So sometimes it is because the muscles are not strong enough, they're not giving your spine a good support. But if you know, there are many other causes of why you could have back pain, so that might be worth looking into and trying to get to the root of that. But that's a great question.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Janice, did you have a question?
No, it was really good. It was really helpful.
Awesome. Let me go ahead and peek in the chat here. Okay. All right, so no questions here. What I'm going to do for just a moment, I will share my screen because I know some of you guys have to get going. We're right at the